The Absurd Awakening. Tonight, we won't chase meaning. We will explore the exquisite, unsettling freedom found in the acceptance that, perhaps, there is none that is externally given. We're going to learn how to master the art of the absurd, a philosophy designed not to make the world make sense, but to make your existence exhilaratingly real. Let the noise of the day fall away. As your body settles into the mattress and your mind begins its nightly negotiations with silence, will awaken something far more profound than drowsiness, a fundamental understanding of what it means to be truly awake in an indifferent universe. This isn't just theory, this is a survival manual for the deeply thoughtful. It's about recognizing the psychological structures that keep you chained to expectations you didn't even set. The central dilemma of your waking life is this: if the world offers no ultimate answers, should we stop asking the questions? Or should we finally learn how to live within the perfect, chaotic silence? Let's begin with that necessary realization, the foundation of this entire philosophy. Close your eyes, but keep your internal sight focused. Have you ever felt that flicker of profound disconnect? That moment when you realize the script you're following, the mandated cycle of wake up, work, consume, repeat, and aspire, was written by no one you know, and perhaps no one at all. That uneasy, stomach-dropping feeling is the first tremor of the absurd awakening. For Albert Camus, the absurd is not simply a concept of meaninglessness, though that is often its result. It is fundamentally a divorce. It is the irreconcilable schism between the human heart, which screams with a desperate need for clarity, unity, and eternal significance, and the cold, unyielding silence of the cosmos, which refuses to provide any. The absurd is born only from this confrontation, this friction. It is not inherent in humanity alone, nor in the world alone. It exists only in their relentless encounter. It is a state of perpetual tension, an energetic contradiction that defines our existence. We are, in this sense, built to be cosmically homeless. Our internal logic demands purpose. The external reality delivers only facts and physics. We attempt to bridge this massive gulf through leaps of faith, philosophical systems, or the sheer distraction of endless striving. But occasionally, in the most quiet, vulnerable hours, those bridges collapse. Imagine you are standing on a stage, brilliant spotlights blinding you. You know, deep down, that your role is vital, consequential. Yet when you turn to the director for instructions, the chair is empty, draped in shadow. The audience expects a profound, defining performance, but the only script handed to you is blank. You try to speak, to convey the great purpose you know you possess, but the universe simply responds with a shrug, an echo of your own voice bouncing off the infinite void. This feeling, the overwhelming certainty of personal importance crashing against the objective, universal insignificance, that is the absurd crystallized. We spend our lives building elaborate defenses against this realization. We construct meticulous structures of belief, career trajectories, financial benchmarks, relationship milestones, spiritual certainties, all designed to fill the void left by the absent director. But occasionally, often in the quiet of the late night or the shock of sudden loss, the machinery breaks down. You catch sight of yourself in the mirror, mid-task, polishing an object you bought or arguing a point that won't matter next week, and the stark thought hits you: why am I doing any of this? This momentary pause, this existential hiccup, is what Camus called the awakening. It's the abrupt realization that the routine that sustains us is fundamentally mechanical, driven by habit and inertia rather than inherent necessity. We have mistaken the movement for the destination. Look at the anxiety that blankets modern life. It isn't just about paying bills. It's the constant, underlying dread that the immense effort we expend might ultimately be for nothing. We run faster on the treadmill of progress, hoping that sheer speed itself will generate meaning. But the absurd insists the treadmill has no destination. The moment you step off, the realization of your own fleeting presence and radical freedom hits with shocking clarity. The philosophical shift here is profoundly liberating. When you fully embrace the absurd, you stop begging the universe for a meaning it cannot give. You gain a terrible, beautiful freedom. If the cosmic script is blank, then you are the playwright. If the rules that govern ultimate purpose are arbitrary, then you define the game's rules for yourself. This is the first essential step, understanding that the tragedy of the absurd is simultaneously the greatest opportunity for human liberation. You are free from the crushing weight of cosmic expectation, because, quite simply, there are none. The stage is empty, the spotlights are blinding, and the audience is waiting. But now, you realize you don't have to perform the great drama of salvation. You can simply choose the drama of sheer, defiant living. Let this paradoxical truth settle in your bones as you drift closer to rest. The only way to genuinely start living is to wholeheartedly accept that life itself is built upon a foundation of beautiful, eloquent silence. We begin here, at the edge of the void, learning not how to escape the absurd, but how to consciously, joyfully, and defiantly triumph within it. Feudal victory, Sisyphus's myth, the feudal victory, Sisyphus's joy. Have you ever felt the precise weight of repetition? That dull, systemic, crushing feeling when you realize the tasks ahead, the emails, the commutes, the responsibilities, the attempts to order a universe that refuses to stay tidy, are fundamentally the same ones you handled yesterday and the ones you will handle again tomorrow. It's not despair you feel, it's the quiet recognition of a vast, underlying treadmill. This is where we encounter Albert Camus and his monumental figure, Sisyphus. For Camus, the absurd is not a philosophy of doom, but an observation of fundamental conflict. It is the clash between humanity's innate, desperate need for meaning, clarity, and eternal comfort, and the universe's utter, cold indifference, its eloquent silence. You demand a script, a purpose, a final chapter. The cosmos simply shrugs. The life you live is an unrelenting dialogue between your rational desires and the irrational, chaotic reality that constantly surrounds you. And Camus saw Sisyphus, the man condemned by the gods to push a massive boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down the moment it reaches the peak, as the perfect illustration of this tension. Sisyphus's punishment is not the labor itself, it is the knowledge of the labor's ultimate futility. He sweats, he strains, he uses every ounce of his will to conquer the incline. For that fleeting moment on the summit, he experiences what might resemble a victory. But immediately the great stone, governed by simple, uncaring physics, begins its long, rumbling descent. It accelerates. It crashes, and it lands exactly where he started. His destiny is to return to the bottom and begin the climb again. He is the eternal laborer in a world without endpoint or reward. But here's where the absurd grants its crucial, brilliant insight. The mechanism of freedom is consciousness. When Sisyphus turns and walks back down the mountain, he is no longer the victim of the gods. He knows the rock will fall. He knows the task is pointless. He is fully lucid. And in this consciousness, he steps outside the bounds of his condemnation. The path downhill is his time for reflection, his time to acknowledge the truth of his predicament. He embraces the fate that was handed to him, and by embracing it, he makes the fate his own. This moment of contempt for the gods who tried to assign him meaning, this silent, stubborn revolt against hope, is his true victory. The rock is simply the object through which he expresses his defiance. We are all modern Sisyphus figures. We are pushing the collective rock of digital entropy, clearing an inbox that will refill by morning, chasing metrics that reset quarterly, accumulating possessions that only accumulate more maintenance. We are driving in circles, driven by invisible, systemic demands. You are rolling your own boulder every single day. The futility inherent in these daily struggles, the realization that no amount of effort will produce a definitive, final, and lasting state of equilibrium can be overwhelming. But if you accept the universe's indifference, if you refuse to rely on the promise of a future reward, something fundamentally shifts inside your perception. The value transfers entirely from the destination, the fleeting peak, to the journey itself, the climb. Your life is measured not by the height the rock achieved, but by the quality of your struggle. The work is sufficient unto itself. The struggle, when embraced fully, lucidly, and without hope for external redemption, ceases to be a curse and becomes a setting for profound human experience. This realization is the profound psychological comfort offered by Camus. Sisyphus is happy. He is happy because he is the master of his days, the owner of his fate, defined only by the consistent, conscious effort he chooses to apply. He knows the outcome, but he chooses the effort anyway. His tragedy is his clarity. His triumph is his embrace of that clarity. The struggle toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus smiling. The essential rupture, divorcing the expected. The essential rupture is not an event that happens to you. It is a clinical realization of how long you have been happening to yourself without permission. It is the moment you recognize the stranger within, the one who has been operating the machinery of your life while the real self slept. When did your life stop feeling like your own? Was there a single quiet Tuesday when the script you were following simply dissolved into noise? A sudden, dizzying loss of coordinates, even while you stood firmly in your kitchen? This moment, this divorce from the expected, is the crucial pivot point Camus illuminates. It is not despair, it is precision. It is the cold, clean feeling of the fundamental fraudulence of the great promise, the inherent meaning you were sold through culture, religion, and aspiration. You have reached the point of the silent indifference of the world. We mistake this realization for a breakdown, but it is, in fact, the first step toward genuine freedom. For decades, perhaps, you have been riding the same commuter train, the route defined by the expectations of others, the landscape familiar only through habit. You know the sequence of stops, the names of the suburbs, the exact moment the sun hits the window pane. But then, one morning, you look out, truly look out, and realize you do not recognize the landscape. You do not know your destination, and critically, you do not recognize the tired reflection staring back from the window. The train is still moving. Obligations still call, but the internal contract, the belief that this movement leads to a justified, predetermined end, is shredded. The rupture has occurred. The mechanism of this rupture is the collision between two incompatible forces, the human need for unity and the universe's resolute silence. You crave narrative, coherence, a reason why. The universe responds with echoes, randomness, and an eternal, beautiful lack of concern. We are trapped in this irreconcilable confrontation, which is the definition of the absurd. The tension within this stage is the resistance to evasion. We are pulled strongly toward two escapes: philosophical suicide, leaping into hope, faith, or abstraction to resolve the tension, or physical suicide, total negation of the experience. Camus demands we do neither. He asks us to stay poised on the tightrope, witnessing the divorce between ourselves and the world, refusing to look away, yet refusing to collapse. This rupture applies intensely to modern life, where we meticulously curate an existence designed to signal success, fulfillment, and control. We are endlessly busy building the perfect career, the perfect family, the perfect spiritual practice. The rupture arrives when you complete the construction and stand within the beautiful, expensive structure, only to find it is hollow. The intense feeling of busyness reveals itself to be nothing more than an elaborate distraction, a self-imposed coma designed to avoid the fundamental question, why am I doing any of this? The psychological impact of fully embracing this rupture is profound. It is the birth of the absurd hero. By shedding the expectation of external justification, you are stripped down to the irreducible minimum, the experience itself. The absence of external meaning does not lead to despair. It leads to the radical creation of value. Since nothing is inherently important, everything becomes important because you deem it so. Every kiss, every sunrise, every act of rebellion against the routine becomes precious because its existence is dependent solely on your conscious attention. You stop waiting for a cosmic purpose to validate your choices. Your choices become the purpose. This is the moment you reclaim your sovereignty from the indifferent cosmos. The essential rupture is simply this: you stop waiting for the next scene to begin, and you start writing your own lines in the dark theater. Most minds drift away before reaching this point. But you're still here. Leave your like so I'll know your mind didn't wander. The sacred no, the logic of revolt, the inevitable turn from recognition to revolt. You have accepted the silence of the universe. You have shouldered the stone, and you understand the quiet, solitary defiance of Sisyphus. But what happens when that stone, the burden of the absurd, is arbitrarily forced onto someone else's back? Does personal acceptance morph inevitably into social complicity? Camus tells us that acceptance of the meaningless is only half the journey. The second, and perhaps most vital half, is the recognition of the boundary the moment we say no. This is the meaning of the sacred no. Camus believed that true human dignity is not found in the initial recognition of the absurd, but in the subsequent necessary revolt. This is not historical revolution, seeking to replace one tyranny with another in the name of some distant, ultimate meaning. This is a moral revolt, primal and metaphysical. It is the reflexive action of the spirit drawing a line in the sand, a sudden, clear refusal of imposed suffering or injustice. It is the moment you look at the inherent chaos or the organized cruelties of the world and declare, "This I refuse. This goes too far." Imagine you are standing on that familiar hill, acknowledging the futility of your existence under the indifferent stars. Suddenly, you witness an arbitrary act of domination, one person humiliating, diminishing, or destroying another. The logic of the absurd, purely applied, says, it doesn't matter, nothing matters. But something internal, deep, and ancient screams against that logic. It is not reason that compels you to intervene or even just bear witness and protest. It is the instinctual, shared realization of a common vulnerability. The revolt is born when the individual recognizes that in defending the dignity of another, they are simultaneously defending the fundamental minimum dignity required for their own sanity. Here lies the profound paradox of Camusian revolt. It is an affirmation born of absolute denial. You deny the possibility of ultimate meaning or divine justice, yet in drawing a boundary, in declaring the injustice unacceptable, you momentarily impose a human value onto the chaos. You are saying, we are worth this much. We are worth the struggle to limit suffering. The rebel demands clarity and order in a world defined by senseless disorder. They start by denying external reality, but they end by affirming the essential human fraternity. The tension is constant, however, because this boundary is constantly shifting, always threatened by the very chaotic forces it tries to contain. The rebel is trapped between the desire for eternal justice and the clear knowledge that such justice does not exist, settling instead for temporary human justice. In our fragmented, hyper-efficient modern life, the revolt is often silent, subtle, and incredibly taxing. It is the moment you refuse the soul-crushing pace of manufactured obsolescence or the manufactured necessity of constant consumption. It's the quiet no to manufactured outrage or the passive acceptance of economic systems that require the degradation of millions to sustain the comfort of a few. When you feel that sense of profound emotional depletion, that existential burnout, it is often the cost of suppressing the sacred no, the constant requirement to comply with demands and systems that diminish human scale. The logic of revolt reminds you that simply enduring the conditions of the absurd is not enough. You must refuse the conditions that systematically force absurdity and suffering upon others. The ultimate impact of this revolt is psychological liberation from isolation. You realize your fate is inextricably linked to others. The rebel discovers that true freedom is not found in limitless, meaningless choice, but in the conscious, shared limitation, the moral boundary we agree not to cross. The moment you define what you will not endure, you define what you are. You transform from the solitary, condemned Sisyphus into a connected human demanding justice for the sake of humanity itself. This revolt is the necessary tension that keeps the human spirit alive, not waiting for salvation, but demanding dignity here and now together. It is the fragile, beautiful affirmation whispered in the face of the void. I revolt, therefore we are. Boundless chains, the paradox of absurd freedom. We arrive now at the dangerous realization, the concept Camus called absurd freedom. Take a deep breath, letting the weight of the previous concepts settle. If the world is silent, if the cosmos holds no blueprint for your behavior, what does that realization do to the concept of constraint? Can freedom truly exist when the ultimate fate is certain, meaningless silence? When you realize the rules governing your life, societal, moral, professional, are fundamentally arbitrary, do you gain power, or do you simply inherit a new kind of terror? Absurd freedom is not the political freedom fought for in revolutions, nor is it the spiritual freedom promised by dogma or salvation. It is the immediate, visceral consequence of recognizing the absurd. It is the liberation that happens after the realization that there is no script, no hidden track, and no cosmic grading system for your existence. Since the universe offers no instruction manual and no higher power demands your loyalty, everything you do is self-authored. Your actions are no longer justified by divine plan or historical destiny. They are justified only by their existence, right now, as an act of personal, conscious creation. This recognition is crucial. The only true constraint upon you is the certainty of death, the ultimate, final, meaningless end. Until that moment, the field is wide open. You are free from meaning, which means you are free to create meaning. Think back to Sisyphus, eternally rolling his stone. While he is physically bound to the mountain, his consciousness is not. In that silent, solitary walk back down the slope, Sisyphus experiences a moment of perfect, absolute liberty. He chooses the climb again, knowing its futility. He could choose to sit down forever, to scream at the empty heavens, or to meticulously arrange every pebble in his path. It changes nothing about the rock or the decree, but it changes everything about him. That internal refusal to let external meaninglessness define his spirit is the expression of absurd freedom. But this freedom is a double-edged sword, the precise mechanism of the boundless chain. The tension arises because once you have ultimate freedom of action, you are simultaneously burdened with ultimate responsibility for your choices. There is no one else to blame for your inertia, your compromises, or your passions. The chain is your awareness that you are inventing your own value system in a void. This is terrifying because every choice is equally unjustified by the cosmos, yet every choice carries enormous weight for the self you are building. You are forced to invent, and the only limit to that invention is the fleeting nature of your own life. Look honestly at your life right now. Consider the arbitrary demands of your job, the relentless digital scroll, the social goals you inherited instead of chose. Absurd freedom calls you to challenge every single one of those self-imposed prisons. Are you working toward a promotion because it genuinely fuels a personal project, or because it's the hollow script society handed you? The freedom lies in recognizing that the promotion, the status, the perfect Instagram aesthetic, these things possess no intrinsic meaning outside of the fleeting significance you assign them. They are merely props in a play you are directing. This realization requires a profound psychological shift, moving from anxious seeking, trying to find predefined meaning, to expansive acceptance, creating meaning through revolt and engagement. You realize that your life is not a puzzle to be solved, but a canvas to be filled with experience. You are defined by the sheer quantity of experience you embrace, the passion you dedicate to a craft, the depth of your relationships, the joy of a small, perfect moment, the integrity with which you face suffering. These intense human experiences are the rebellion. This is how you scorn the infinite and the eternal, by living intensely and consciously in the finite now. Your life is precious precisely because it is meaningless to the stars. The boundaries were never external. They were always internal, defined by your own willingness to look away from the vast, empty sky and back toward the magnificent chaos of the human world. So, rest now, knowing you are completely unbound, except by the precious, diminishing time you have left. The chains of expectation are off. Your ultimate, terrifying, beautiful freedom is simply this: to decide how you will spend the minutes the universe doesn't care about. A full life in emptiness, the passion of quantity. We've established the silence of the universe, the deafening echo of no answer. Now, lying here, the final instruction is the hardest to accept, but the only one that truly sets you free. Embrace the passion of quantity. You're drifting now, right at the edge of consciousness. But before you surrender completely, consider this profound redirection. What if the only way to defeat the crushing weight of meaninglessness isn't to find meaning, but simply to accumulate life? What if the highest form of philosophical achievement is nothing more than sheer defiant persistence? This is the necessary turn in the thought process of the absurd man. When you recognize that every grand endeavor to establish eternal quality, a perfect moral code, a unified theory of everything, a lasting legacy, is doomed to fail because the universe doesn't validate it, you are liberated. You are free to stop searching for the singular perfect answer and instead start cataloging the immense, beautiful range of questions. Quantity, in this context, is not a consumerist drive to own more things. It is the existential commitment to experience more moments. It is the immediate, visceral response to the void. Since I cannot have eternity, I will have all of this. Imagine two seekers standing before the same vast, empty canvas that is life. The first spends decades mixing one perfect shade, attempting to paint a single, beautiful, flawless image that summarizes existence, striving for supreme quality. The second, having accepted the futility of summarizing anything, grabs every color available, the harsh yellows of anxiety, the muddy browns of disappointment, the electric blues of sudden joy, and covers the canvas in a chaotic, furious, beautiful mess. He prioritizes saturation over symmetry. The wall remains a wall, indifferent to the effort, but one man has truly lived the painting process, measuring his existence not by its final value, but by the raw volume of his participation. The crucial paradox of the absurd response is that the moment you stop trying to live the one great life that justifies your existence, you become defined by the infinite thousands of small, insignificant lives you allow yourself to inhabit. This is the mechanism of revolt. It is the refusal to hedge your bets on a future reward or a heavenly reconciliation. Every mediocre cup of coffee, every frustrating minute stuck in traffic, every fleeting moment of laughter that disappears instantly, they are all stamps of your presence. They are equal parts of the evidence of your singular temporal freedom. The absurdist embraces every possible experience, not because he is a hedonist seeking pleasure, but because he is a philosopher seeking maximum awareness. We often confuse this quantitative drive with modern accumulation. The endless scrolling, the acquisition of material possessions, the desire to tick boxes on a bucket list defined by external metrics. But Camus' quantity is deeply interior and fiercely immediate. It is the quantity of feeling, the quantity of focused breath, the quantity of observation. It is the deep refusal to waste the only certain reality we possess, the present moment. This insistence on presence forces us to cash in our chips right now, demanding immersion in the physical world, rejecting the escapism inherent in false hope. This philosophical posture is terrifying precisely because it removes the comfortable safety net of inherited purpose. But it is profoundly, uniquely liberating. You are no longer judged by the quality of your moral perfection or your historical legacy. You are judged solely by the depth of your involvement in the fleeting, passing world. It validates the mundane. It says, this quiet, ordinary Tuesday, lived fully and fiercely, is just as profound as a revelation on a mountaintop. To multiply experiences is not just an act of living, it is an act of intellectual defiance against the silence of the cosmos. To live intensely is to rebel fully. And in that passionate, exhaustive embrace of quantity, you find your only true absolute life. The safety of forgetting, the escape of consciousness, the voluntary amnesia of being. You've grasped the absurd, you've faced the silence of the indifferent universe, and you have, for a searing moment, held the unbearable clarity of meaninglessness. Now tell me, how long can you hold that truth before your mind, weary of the burden, insists on slipping the leash? The confrontation with the absurd is a moment of profound, painful honesty. The subsequent move is the necessity of escaping consciousness. This is not a philosophical retreat. This is a biological imperative. It is the moment the self acknowledges the terrifying truth but cannot, structurally, live permanently under its weight. We define this escape as a kind of psychological gravity assist. The instant you acknowledge the grand, cold indifference of the cosmos, a secondary, self-regulating mechanism activates, the urgent biological need to render the universe manageable again, to simplify the complex catastrophe into something you can handle between the hours of 9 and 5. Camus understood this counterpole perfectly. He saw that the true test of lucidity wasn't just recognizing the absurd, but enduring the constant, nagging temptation to abandon that crushing knowledge for the soft pillow of comfort, purpose, or delusion. To live fully is to feel the weight of existence, but to live at all requires us to forget that weight periodically. This is the safety of forgetting. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing at the very edge of a deep crater, the gaping void of existential meaninglessness. The view is spectacular, terrifying, and profoundly truthful. But your mind, sensing the danger of perpetual freefall and the sheer impracticality of living on a crumbling precipice, spontaneously builds a small, sturdy cabin 50 feet back from the edge. It furnishes the cabin with comforting routines, the pursuit of status, the planning of next summer's vacation, the detailed analysis of someone else's fictional drama. It installs thick, soundproof walls of distraction. You reserve the right to visit the edge when you need perspective, but you cannot, for your own sanity, live there. That cabin, that carefully structured interior life, is your voluntary amnesia. The paradox inherent in this mechanism is devastatingly subtle. The second we achieve true freedom, the freedom derived from realizing that nothing matters in the ultimate, universal sense, we immediately begin looking for a new set of self-imposed limitations, or at least a comfortable hammock. We use structure, the schedule, the plan, the deadline, to silence the overwhelming echoes of the void. We chase fleeting purpose, the promotion, the temporary ecstasy of a new relationship, the optimization of the mundane, not because these things solve the absurd, but because they are intricate enough to demand 100% of our cognitive focus. They temporarily occupy the critical seat of consciousness that the absurd normally claims. This is not a betrayal of philosophy. It is the human nervous system staging a quiet, successful coup against existential rigor. The tension is acute. We are intellectually aware that we are constructing a temporary, convenient delusion. Yet we desperately require that delusion to simply function until the next sunrise. Look at your own attempts at escaping consciousness. The endless scroll through screens, the hours lost to binge-watching, the compulsive overworking late into the night. These are not merely poor habits. They are sophisticated avoidance rituals. They are the modern equivalent of Sisyphus finding a hobby, say competitive rock polishing, so that the climb becomes a necessary detour rather than the sole purpose of existence. The escape isn't the entertainment itself. The escape is the temporary feeling of necessity it provides. We become professional meaning inventors, constructing elaborate, disposable narratives every Monday morning just so we have a reason to get out of bed, only to discard them, exhausted, by Friday night. What changes within you when you recognize this mechanism is the realization that the urge to escape is not a moral failing, but a strategy. When you stop fighting the impulse to forget and start observing it, you gain new leverage. You realize that lucidity and distraction are not enemies, but two sides of the same human coin, and you are doomed, wonderfully, to vacillate between them. The philosophical courage is not staying at the edge of the crater forever. The courage is knowing that the cozy cabin is always temporary and maintaining the awareness that the crater still exists, even when the lights are low and the necessary distractions are running full volume. This dual citizenship, in the world of ultimate cold truth and the world of necessary warm delusion, is the only sustainable way to live an absurd life fully. Sleep now. Allow the natural reset to occur, but understand this. When you fall into the void of slumber, you are not escaping consciousness, you are simply changing its location. And even in the deepest safety of forgetting, the ticket stub to the absurd is still clutched firmly in your hand, ready for your next waking performance. Familiar alienation, the life of the stranger. Familiar alienation, the perpetual foreigner. Have you ever paused mid-conversation, realizing that while you understand every word being said, the entire scene feels like a movie playing just for you, not involving you? You are present, physically anchored to the room, yet fundamentally detached. You feel an immense, quiet distance between the performance you are giving and the essential you watching the show. This sensation is the cornerstone of Albert Camus' philosophy, the irreducible experience of the stranger. It is not just about feeling lonely in a crowd or even missing a sense of belonging. It is the profound realization that the world, the conventions, the rituals, the mandatory expressions of grief or joy are ultimately meaningless. Fabricated structures that you do not and perhaps cannot truly belong to. Camus gave this feeling a voice through his character, Meursault, a man who fails the test of societal expectation, not out of malice, but out of sheer, baffling indifference. He doesn't conform because the mechanisms of conforming, the necessity of tears at a funeral, the compulsion to profess love, the expectation of outrage, simply do not compute within his honest internal logic. The stranger, in this context, is the person who rejects the emotional currency of the tribe, even if that rejection brings exile and condemnation. He is honest in a world built on necessary hypocrisy. To truly understand this estrangement, imagine standing before a massive ancient pane of glass. On one side is your life, the career demands, the social calendar, the routine of maintenance. On the other side is you, looking in, observing your own reflection moving through the motions. The glass is soundproof, but perfectly clear. You see your body move, laughing on cue, agreeing conventionally, expressing sympathy when appropriate. But your inner monologue is utterly disconnected from the performance. You are the protagonist of a life you don't inhabit, separated by the thinnest membrane of consciousness. The paradox of familiar alienation is brutal. The more honestly you perceive reality, the chaos, the lack of ultimate meaning, the fundamental absurdity, the more distant you become from accepted reality. Society functions on shared fictions. This matters. We feel this way. This action has consequences dictated by morality. The stranger sees these fictions as just that, fictions, useful perhaps, but ultimately untrue. This raw intellectual honesty is isolating. It makes you realize that your own face, staring back from the mirror, is the most profound alien encounter you will ever have. You wake up and ask, who is this person whose life I am inhabiting today? In our modern, hyper-connected landscape, this alienation is magnified to a staggering degree. We exist across multiple planes of performance. We curate digital selves, profiles, narratives, highlight reels that require relentless, exhausting management. We become strangers to the authentic self by prioritizing the projected self. We are perpetually waiting for the moment when the mask aligns seamlessly with the face, for the internal landscape to match the external presentation. And the fundamental tension of the absurd ensures that moment never arrives. We are simultaneously the actor, the director, and the most critical audience member of our own disconnected play. But this estrangement, while painful, carries within it an unexpected seed of revolutionary freedom. When you finally recognize that the rituals and expectations of the world are foreign to you, their compulsive power over you dissolves. The world cannot truly hurt a heart that refuses to participate in its mandated theatrical performances. You gain the right to define what is real and worthwhile to you simply because you have admitted that what is conventional is not necessarily true. You realize your deepest, most enduring responsibility is only to the clarity of your own consciousness. You no longer have to struggle to belong where you already know you are an outsider. Your solitude is not a failure of character. It is the birthplace of existential integrity. To be the stranger is to finally stop pretending the indifferent universe cares about your performance. Embrace the distance. Your home is not here nor there, but in the quiet, honest space between those 2 points. Sleep well, outsider. The necessity of useless virtue, solidarity in the face of plague. We must now confront the necessity of useless virtue. It sounds counterintuitive, perhaps even like a beautiful mistake. But in the indifferent universe, Camus describes a universe that absolutely refuses to acknowledge your efforts. It is the deepest path toward shared meaning. Why do we still choose to hold hands when the inevitable silence of death awaits us all? Have you ever felt the profound, draining futility of effort? That moment when the cosmic scale weighs your tiny act of kindness against the abyss and finds it laughable. Yet, something stubborn in the human spirit rebels against that dismissal. It whispers that meaning isn't found in the logical outcome, but in the shared struggle itself. If the universe refuses to make sense, then we must become the sense makers for each other. This concept pivots directly from the raw, solitary confrontation with the absurd. When you first realize the cosmos offers no moral guide, the seductive temptation is pure nihilism, to live only for the self, for immediate sensation and brute power. Useless virtue is the philosophical refusal of that nihilism, rejected not based on a grand celestial mandate, but based on a terrestrial shared mandate. It is the action taken purely because it affirms life, dignity, and humanity now, regardless of the metaphysical ledger or the eventual outcome. It is a rebellion against cold, calculating logic for the sake of companionship. You do good not because it will save the world, but because it saves the sliver of shared space between you and another human being. Consider the physicians and volunteers in the plague. They are battling an enemy they cannot truly defeat. They know that every fever they manage, every life they save, is merely a temporary reprieve. The plague will return, or something else will. Yet, they continue to run the isolation wards, to document the deaths, to administer the futile serums. Dr. Rio isn't driven by the hope of a definitive victory or the promise of heavenly reward. He is driven by simple professional duty, a dedication to healing, even when healing is revealed as a temporary illusion. He simply states that it is his job, but deeper than that, it is his way of staying human, his way of affirming that the suffering inflicted by the world will not be doubled by human cruelty or indifference. Here is the paradox at the heart of the mechanism. Camus initially championed Sisyphus, the individual who stares down the hill alone, finding dignity in his solitary acceptance of fate. But the plague demands something different. It forces Sisyphus to look up and realize there are 10,000 other people rolling stones alongside him. Useless virtue is the choice to share the burden of that stone, even though 2 people rolling it still won't stop it from eventually rolling back down. The mechanism works by transforming individual revolt into solidarity. The absurd demands isolation. Human virtue demands connection. You are choosing to recognize that the suffering of your neighbor is your suffering, not because of karma or destiny, but because you both share the same fragile reality under the same uncaring sky. This shift is difficult. It requires the continuous, exhausting effort of empathy when logic says empathy is unnecessary. How does this apply to your modern isolation, to the light of the screen reflecting in your eyes? Think of the vast, overwhelming problems: climate change, systemic injustice, the ceaseless churn of global anxiety. Logically, what can your singular act of recycling, or your donation, or your participation in a small local movement truly accomplish against the inertial mass of global indifference? The logic of the absurd whispers, nothing. But useless virtue compels you to act anyway. It is the acknowledgement that meaning is found in the creation of micro-universes of decency, small, temporary safe harbors built through shared effort. These acts don't solve the world, but they transform you, shifting you from passive spectator into an active participant in shared humanity. The psychological impact of embracing useless virtue is profound. It moves you out of the paralyzing loop of cynical despair. Despair is the philosophical byproduct of demanding cosmic validation for your actions. Courage, in this context, is the internal decision to provide your own validation collaboratively. You stop waiting for the world to confirm that your life matters, and instead you confirm that your neighbor's life matters, and in that profound, fragile exchange, your own meaning is forged. This shared recognition of fragility, the solidarity found in facing the inevitability of the plague, is the ultimate source of human dignity. It is refusing to let the cold indifference of the cosmos dictate the warmth of your own behavior. Taru, the great companion in Camus's work, summarizes the entire project simply. All that counts is to be a decent human being. And in an absurd world, that decency, that useless, defiant, beautiful virtue, becomes the final, irreplaceable definition of what it means to be alive. You are defining the human spirit not by its conquests, but by its collaborations. Seeking the lost home, nostalgia for wholeness. The search we are undertaking now, as the night deepens and the mind softens, is fundamentally an act of metaphysical homesickness. We are seeking what philosophers call the lost unity, the primordial connection, the moment before the great divorce between the human longing for meaning and the universe's silent indifference. This isn't about finding where you parked your car or remembering a childhood address. It's about the profound, unshakable nostalgia for a state of wholeness, a time when truth felt unified, absolute, and kind. Have you ever felt that intense, almost painful pull toward a memory that doesn't quite exist? A feeling of profound recognition for a place you've never actually been. That ache, that subtle, insistent dissonance within your chest, is the echo of this ancient longing. It is the realization that you, the conscious, questioning self, were perhaps separated from the seamless fabric of reality long ago, and every single action since has been a desperate, silent attempt to re-stitch the thread. Albert Camus framed this yearning as the first, non-negotiable element in the equation of the absurd. The absurd is not chaos itself, but the constant, agonizing collision between the human need for rational answers, for cosmic comfort, and the brute silence of the cosmos. This lost home is the absolute certainty, the divine blueprint, the logical explanation for suffering. We are built with a navigational system meant for a destination that doesn't exist on the map. This engine of nostalgia drives theology, metaphysics, and every utopian dream ever conceived, because it is rooted in the fundamental, painful premise that existence is inherently disjointed and fractured. Imagine you are walking through a beautifully crafted, seemingly perfect home. Every room is furnished, the light is soft, the fireplace crackles invitingly. But as you move deeper into the corridors, you realize with chilling certainty, you have never seen this house before, yet somehow you are expected to live here forever. You know how the doors work. You understand the laws of physics that hold the ceiling up, but you don't know the intent of the architect. Who built this structure and why? Your deepest fear is realizing that perhaps the architect never existed, and the house simply stands, indifferent to the fact that you feel fundamentally like a stranger in your own dwelling. That feeling, the stranger staring at his reflection and not recognizing the intent behind the eyes, that is the core existential homelessness. The irony of this condition is devastating. The very act of seeking this lost home ensures you can never truly settle in the present. If you are always searching for unification, clarity, and preordained meaning, you are implicitly rejecting the messy, fractured, and contingent beauty of the moment you inhabit. The search for the lost home, in effect, creates the homeless condition. This quest forces you to live perpetually in the conditional tense. If I find the grand meaning, then I can finally live. But Camus insists the only way to genuinely live is to discard the if and embrace the is, even if the is utterly illogical, unjust, and temporary. The deeper you dig for permanent roots, the more untethered and restless you become in the here and now. Look at how this consuming nostalgia plays out in modern life. It manifests as the obsessive search for the perfect routine, the ultimate productivity hack, the constant consumption that promises a momentary feeling of completeness, of having finally filled the hole. We try to purchase wholeness. We scroll endlessly, seeking the digital connection that promises community, only to find deeper isolation. This lost home is rebranded daily as the unattainable state of being fully realized. The endless pressure to achieve self-optimization, to be 100% complete and perfect, is merely a modern, hyper-capitalist symptom of the deep metaphysical yearning to fix what we perceive as broken or incomplete within ourselves. We are seeking the certainty we crave through retail therapy and self-help manuals. The philosophical breakthrough, the pivot toward absurdity, comes when you realize the map is the territory, that the destination is the journey, and the home is constructed, not found. What if the universe is fundamentally non-hostile, but simply non-committal? The acceptance of homelessness is the first step toward the creation of a temporary dwelling, built from the fragments of your own revolt and creativity. You stop trying to reconcile yourself with the universe and start reconciling yourself with yourself. This is the moment you reclaim your sovereign territory, your own fleeting conscious life, lived fully and passionately against the backdrop of eternal silence. The true absurdity is that in abandoning the search for the grand meaning, you create 1,000 smaller, more resilient, and more immediate meanings right where you stand. So let the craving for the lost home subside tonight. Understand that perhaps true peace is not finding the answer, but finally, deeply, settling into the magnificent, echoing silence of having nowhere absolute to go. You are already home, precisely because you know you are a traveler with no required itinerary. Sleep is coming, and in this temporary stillness you can finally cease the futile construction of certainty. Halfway. If you're still awake, it means you were meant to be here. Subscribe and keep walking this quiet path with us. The rebel's compromise, saying no to nothingness. You have accepted the silence of the cosmos. You have learned to push the stone, finding joy in the very rhythm of the failure. You have faced the absurd head-on. But what happens when that acceptance, that quiet, beautiful resignation, begins to feel like a retreat? Is the ultimate freedom merely the surrender to meaninglessness? Or is there a way to stand up in the void without requiring the scaffolding of faith or certainty? We arrive now at the third and final response to the cosmic indifference, the ultimate existential imperative described by Camus, the revolt. This is not a political revolution, though it can certainly spark one. It is a fundamental, philosophical refusal. The revolt is the moment you draw a line in the sand, not to define the meaning of life, which remains impossible, but to define what you absolutely will not tolerate in the face of meaninglessness. The rebel says, "I may not know why I am here, but I know what is unbearable." This sudden, fierce realization is the spontaneous, unjustified birth of human value. If the absurd is the confrontation between our demand for clarity and the universe's unreasonable silence, then the revolt is our decision to side with our own demand, regardless of whether it can ever be satisfied. It is the only way to resist the philosophical temptation toward nihilism, which insists that since nothing means anything, everything is permitted. The rebel refuses that conclusion. The rebel maintains that because we are conscious of the limits, we must honor the limits. Imagine a tiny firefly floating in the absolute lightless pressure of the ocean abyss. That firefly cannot hope to illuminate the entire ocean. Its light is functionally useless against the infinite blackness and the crushing cold, yet it chooses to flash anyway. Its entire being is a defiant existence, a flicker that insists light must exist, purely because it is capable of generating it. The firefly's revolt is not against the darkness, but against the idea that darkness dictates whether light is valid. That self-justifying illumination, that brief, stubborn moment of affirmation, that is the very core of revolt. Here is the exquisite paradox of the rebel. To rebel against the absurd seems initially illogical. If nothing matters, why fight against injustice, resist oppression, or struggle against the sheer horror of a meaningless death? The mechanism of revolt works precisely because, in the act of saying no to the intolerable, you simultaneously say a profound, unwavering yes to something else. When you deny nothingness its total victory, you affirm that something, the integrity of the human being, the fleeting moment of shared pain, the necessity of compassion, is valuable enough to fight for, even if that value is transient, temporary, and entirely human-made. The rebel risks everything, not for eternal glory or ultimate justification, but for the clarity of a temporary shared dignity. It is the only true form of solidarity available to those who have lost their illusions. Where does this translate in your modern, tired life? It is the quiet decision to act ethically even when cheating would be easier and consequence-free. It is the monumental effort you put into perfecting a craft or loving another person, knowing that both endeavors are destined to end and dissolve into time. Your revolt is the conscious choice to create beauty where there is chaos, to defend vulnerability where there is power, and to stand with the suffering, purely because the alternative, cynical resignation, is a betrayal of the living, breathing human spirit. It is the rejection of nihilism, not through belief but through committed action. The psychological impact of the revolt is the ultimate transformation. By transforming the acceptance of the absurd, the passive Sisyphus, into the practice of revolt, the active rebel, you shift from a mere coping mechanism to a robust existence strategy. You cease being a tragic figure merely enduring fate and become instead a sovereign creator of limited, localized meaning. Camus offers us freedom from the despair of meaninglessness by insisting that we must create values that transcend mere self-interest. We fight together, sharing the burden of consciousness, creating a fragile, magnificent human community against the crushing, indifferent weight of the cosmos. The rebel teaches us that we do not wait for the universe to validate our existence. We validate it ourselves, right now, in the tiny, vital space between the no of resistance and the yes of shared struggle. Your life, in this moment of quiet waiting, is the ultimate compromise, a defiant act of worth in a world fundamentally unworthy of the effort. Sleep now and know this truth. To be fully human is to say no to nothingness, and in that refusal, to finally find your deepest, truest voice. Creating order from chaos, the artistic imperative. We arrive now at the third and perhaps most vital response to the confrontation with the absurd, the aesthetic confrontation. If freedom is the necessary practice and revolt is the unwavering commitment, art is the enduring record, the proof that we were here and that we saw the silence clearly. It is the imperative to create meaning, knowing full well that the meaning is entirely self-imposed, a defiance constructed against the very laws of the universe. You have acknowledged the crushing indifference of the cosmos. The moment of recognition has passed. But what do you do with that unbearable weight? Do you simply sit in the rubble of perceived meaning, paralyzed by futility? Or do you pick up the shards and assemble them into something deliberately beautiful, something that shouts back at the void? The artistic act is the active choice to respond to universal silence, not with reciprocal silence, but with articulation. Camus saw the artist, the creator, not as someone seeking to solve the absurd, but as someone defining it, refining its dimensions. Art is not an attempt to explain the inexplicable. It is, more truthfully, an attempt to describe the experience of the inexplicable. It's a willful, disciplined act of creation that imposes a temporary, recognizable, and human frame around the endless, formless chaos that surrounds us. The artist uses finite means, a brushstroke, a chord, a sentence, to capture an infinite dissatisfaction, giving form to what is inherently formless. Imagine a solitary lighthouse keeper, completely isolated, living on a rock, battered constantly by the raw, indifferent power of the Atlantic. The storm outside is violent, continuous, and deafening. It promises eventual annihilation. The keeper knows he cannot stop the storm, nor can he rationalize its existence. But inside his solitary space, he sits, perhaps by the steady light of his own lantern, sketching the brutal lines of the waves he sees through the thick glass. He is creating order from the chaos, not attempting to create order in the chaos. The resulting sketch doesn't change the physical violence of the sea, but it fundamentally changes his relationship to it. It makes the terrifying comprehensible, if only for the duration of the line he draws. This is the great artistic paradox you must live within. You know that everything you create is ultimately perishable, subject to the same decay and disappearance that haunts all life. Yet, you must strive for immediate permanence in your work. Art is the insistence on the particular detail in the face of universal oblivion. The profound tension lies in the awareness that the masterpiece, the novel, the song, is itself a finite object born of an infinite hunger for meaning. You are freezing a moment in time, accepting the frame's limitation, precisely because the rest of existence is pure, unmanageable flux. It is the most sincere and necessary lie we tell ourselves in order to keep breathing. This imperative doesn't just apply to those who hold a traditional paintbrush or a pen. Every time you curate a memory, every time you share a specific filtered narrative of your day, every time you seek to articulate a deeply felt emotion into precise words for another person, you are performing this artistic confrontation. You are taking the messy, chaotic flood of internal and external experience and turning it into a contained, consumable story. Your life, in the end, becomes your most vital and necessary work of fiction, painstakingly crafted moment by moment to make the random seem intentional, to give the contingent narrative coherence. The psychological impact of the artistic confrontation offers a unique and profound solace. When you succeed in articulating the absurd, when you name the suffering, when you draw the distinct landscape of the void, you move from being a passive victim of fate to an active chronicler. Art provides an essential form of human solidarity. It is the moment when you look into the mirror created by another human being and realize with deep relief, you saw it too, and you found the words for it. It is the undeniable proof that even though the cosmos is silent, we are capable of speaking, and our voices, when woven together, form a powerful, echoing insistence on human dignity. Creation, then, is not distraction. It is disciplined love. It is the ultimate and continuous revolt. It is the refusal to accept the chaos as the final defining word. While the universe offers nothing, you offer back form, color, sound, and story. When you create, you are saying, simply and clearly, I know the limits of the frame, but I choose to define the vast expanse within them. And in that choice, even the most fleeting piece of human order resonates infinitely longer than the silence it attempts to tame. Infinity, Infinitude, Don Juan, and Absurd Love. You have been taught, subtly or overtly, to pursue the singular, eternal connection, the fusion of souls that somehow validates the pain and brevity of existence. You seek the one, the relationship that grants you immunity from the absurd, a lifelong narrative of meaning. But what if fulfillment is found not in the singularity of eternal promise, but in the multiplicity of mortal moments? We turn now to a figure often misunderstood, often cast as the villain of morality, but whom Camus elevates to the status of an absurd hero, Don Juan. In the existential landscape, Camus identifies three embodiments of the absurd spirit: the freedom of Sisyphus pushing his rock, the commitment of the conqueror to temporal action, and the passion of Don Juan. Don Juan is not defined by lust, but by quantity. He is not a pleasure seeker in the shallow sense. He is a collector of profound, intense moments. He refuses the illusion of permanence. He is the man who looks at a beautiful face and loves it intensely, utterly, now, knowing full well that tomorrow, or perhaps even in an hour, that connection will be finite, absolute, and finished. This is the meaning of absurd love. Don Juan knows that if he were to love eternally, truly, one single person, he would have found his meaning, his justification, and he would have ceased to be absurd. He would have sacrificed the vastness of the human experience for the comfortable fiction of destiny. The absurd hero must reject destiny. Don Juan understands that if love is a promise that lasts forever, then every passion he feels is diminished by time, or worse, corrupted by the future. His passion is not in the conquering, but in the celebration of the present moment of mutual recognition. Each encounter is a celebration of the finite and the mortal. He doesn't deceive. He acts with an intense, if momentary, sincerity. To truly embody Don Juan's absurdity is to recognize that every encounter holds equal weight and equal finality. You are not searching for a greater love than the one you are currently experiencing. You are simply appreciating the quality of its presence and accepting the necessity of its eventual absence. The paradox of the absurd Don Juan is this. By accepting the inherent finitude of every relationship, he achieves a strange kind of infinite experience. He doesn't hoard time. He spends it lavishly. He knows he has only a fixed number of days, a limited capacity for breath and experience, yet he maximizes the quantity of consciousness within that frame. Think about the tension this creates within you. We often become paralyzed by choice. You fear commitment because commitment means closing off potential future selves and potential future partners. You are driven by FOMO, the fear of missing out, a modern articulation of the anxiety that one experience is less valuable than another. Don Juan cuts this Gordian knot. He realizes there is no hierarchy of experience. By loving each person with the knowledge that this love is self-contained, a beautiful, brief play with no sequel, he escapes the burden of comparison and expectation. He removes the pressure to turn a pure, fiery instant into a tepid, long-running comfort. He honors the intensity of the spark by allowing it to burn out naturally, rather than forcing it into a slow, domestic glow. This rejection of eternity liberates you from judgment. When you enter a relationship, are you demanding that it justify your entire existence? Are you placing the absurd weight of forever upon the shoulders of another mortal being? If you are doomed to disappointment because you are expecting your partner to solve the ultimate conflict of the human condition. The philosophical impact of Don Juan lies in his refusal to mourn. He accepts that the sunset is beautiful precisely because it is momentary. He doesn't rely on memory or hope. He looks forward not in expectation, but in a readiness for the next experience, treating it as entirely new, entirely valuable, and entirely temporary. This is the freedom of non-possession, the ultimate realization that the measure of passion is not its duration, but its intensity. To live fully is to love fiercely, to commit wholly to the moment, and to accept with radical clarity that the curtain will always fall. That acceptance, that quiet acknowledgement of the end, is the beginning of true absurd love. Authenticity and performance, the comedian on the world stage. The integrity of the mask, when performance becomes truth. You lie here, waiting for the gentle subtraction of consciousness, and you wonder, how much of what I present to the world is the act, and how much is truly me? Is there a difference when the mask fits perfectly, when the performance aligns so meticulously with the desperate, honest core that the two become indistinguishable? This isn't about duplicity. It's about realizing that life itself demands constant shifting roles and that every interaction is fundamentally a staged event. Camus shows us that the social structure is a theater. We are teachers, partners, consumers, citizens, navigating expectations that predate us. Each is a performance structured around social contracts, necessity, and the need for connection. The truly absurd individual, however, recognizes this theater not as a burden to escape, but as the only stage available for genuine human expression. Authenticity, in the face of the absurd, is not about stripping away the performance to find some stable, pure inner core. It's about choosing the script you write for yourself and owning the inherent contradictions of your chosen role. Consider the stand-up comedian. Their job is the ultimate confrontation with the meaningless. They stand under a single harsh spotlight, utterly alone, tasked with translating the chaos, fear, and ultimate lack of answers into 3 tight minutes of communal laughter. They are the heralds of the human condition, paid to be brutally honest about how futile and hilarious everything is. To succeed, they must be profoundly vulnerable, sharing their deepest failures and embarrassing truths, yet simultaneously guarded, delivering the material with surgical precision. This performance requires a profound, almost dangerous, integrity. Here emerges the central paradox, the paradox of the authentic joke. Is the comedian being authentic when they tell a joke about their deepest anxieties? They rehearse it 100 times. They perfect the timing, the pause, the inflection. They structure the raw vulnerability into a setup/punchline mechanism designed for maximum audience reaction. It is, by definition, manufactured truth. But this manufacturing process does not dilute the truth, it distills it. When the joke lands, the audience laughs not at the falseness, but at the universal recognition of the shared, ugly truth hidden within the artifice. The comedian accepts the artifice, the stage, the microphone, the structure, as the necessary tools for conveying the authentic feeling of the absurd. The performance is the commitment to truth. The comedian, like the absurd man, commits fully to the performance they have chosen, even knowing that the stage will inevitably disappear. We live this reality every day, though less dramatically. You scroll through carefully curated feeds, watch colleagues manage their corporate personas, and build protective walls around your sensitive self. The anxiety of performance arises only when you seek external validation for a role that doesn't align with your internal revolt. The absurd man performs not to convince the audience of their meaning, but simply to live out the reality they have chosen. Knowing the applause is temporary and the reward is temporary, their true gratification is the act itself, the masterful confrontation with the void. What does this change for you? It frees you from the exhausting pursuit of the absolute self, a stable, static inner core that never adapts or changes. Instead, you realize your integrity is found in the fluid, passionate commitment to your current role, played with full awareness that it is finite. You are not defined by the roles you have to play, but by the conscious decision to play them well, recognizing the ephemeral nature of the stage. The laughter or success doesn't provide the meaning, but it validates the effort and the commitment to the revolt against silence. Tonight, as the silence deepens, ask yourself, if my life is a stage, have I chosen my best material? The truly absurd performance is not the one you hide from, but the one you refuse to apologize for. Sleep awaits the curtain call. The self-willed code, morality and integrity. The self-willed code, building integrity in a moral vacuum. If the cosmos is silent regarding your life and no divine ledger records your actions, what binds you to your own word? Why bother with integrity when the ultimate contract is only between you and the inevitable silence? This is the insidious, quiet challenge of the absurd hero, establishing a self-willed code of conduct in a universe that offers no inherent ethical mandate. We have moved past the hope that meaning will be delivered from above, that silence, the moral vacuum left by the collapse of cosmic authority, is the terrifying space where true integrity must be forged. Traditional morality sought to fill this void with divine law, societal structure, or universal principles. The absurd insists that these are comforting illusions. Therefore, your integrity is not a reflection of cosmic truth. It is a proof of your human will. It is the code you choose, meticulously designed because the universe utterly failed to provide one. Imagine you are the last surviving programmer tasked with maintaining the foundational algorithms of a forgotten civilization. No one will ever audit your code. The machine itself is hidden away, running critical but unseen processes. You could introduce subtle bugs, shortcuts, or redundancies that only serve your immediate ease. You could leave documentation vague and structure messy. Yet you don't. You meticulously comment every line, optimize every loop, and ensure the system runs flawlessly according to its original complex specifications. Why? Because the quality of the code is your silent testimony. It is your signature of self-respect, written into the very logic of the machine, even if that machine will only ever speak its elegant truth to itself. This is the central paradox of absurd integrity. Its value increases precisely when it yields no external reward or recognition. Traditional ethics promise paradise, social acceptance, or a clean reputation. Absurd integrity promises only radical consistency with the self you have chosen to be, the self you have determined worthy of respect. The constant conflict lies in the tension between immediate self-interest and radical self-respect. Do you live in accordance with your chosen code when the cost is highest and the oversight is zero? The self-willed code demands that you are the sole judge, the vigilant auditor of your own actions. To violate it for external gain is not merely a mistake, it is an act of self-betrayal, dissolving the very identity you fought to construct through lucidity. You are tearing down the lighthouse you built in the void, conceding to the chaos outside by allowing chaos inside. Consider the small, digital betrayals of modern life, the subtle exaggeration in a meeting where no one bothers to verify, the private thought that utterly contradicts the public stance, the casual commitment to a promise you never intended to keep. These mundane moments where consequence seems minimal are the true crucible of integrity. Integrity is not tested solely in grand historical moments of sacrifice. It is forged in the silence of the mundane commitment. When you make a commitment to yourself, to write for an hour, to fast from a distraction, to respond to conflict with patience, that low-stakes, self-imposed contract is the foundation of your entire moral universe. If you breach it casually, you are teaching yourself that your own word holds no weight. You are training yourself in the habit of inner dishonesty, undermining the authority of the self-willed code. The profound shift that occurs when you embrace this code is the elimination of the desperate need for external moral validation. You are no longer performing for approval, applause, or absolution. Your actions become authentic reflections of your deeply held values, not merely tools for manipulation or appeasement. This internal alignment is the bedrock of existential peace. While the world outside remains indifferent, chaotic, and loud, inside there is order, coherence, and profound quiet. You gain an unbreakable autonomy because your virtue relies only on your capacity for consistency. When you stand upright in the absurd, you realize that your commitment to integrity is the only unalienable property you possess, the only true shelter you can build. Integrity is the architecture of the absurd hero, the self-imposed law that declares, "I will live justly, not because the universe demands it, but because I demand it of myself. Sleep now, knowing your code is your own." Equilibrium in Extremis, the thought of noon. Equilibrium in Extremis, the moment of conscious clarity. You've spent the whole day fighting gravity, arguing with the clock, wrestling with the phantom burdens you were never actually asked to carry. But what happens, just for this suspended moment, when you decide to let go of the rope? What deep, strange peace arrives when the struggle ceases, not because you won, but because you recognize that losing the fight was never the true danger. The real peril was losing yourself to the ceaseless effort of fighting a condition that cannot be defeated. We are talking about Camus' Noon. It is not the soft, shadowed twilight of reflection, where doubts whisper and worries materialize. Noon is the high burning point of the day where the sun stands directly overhead, erasing all shadows. This clarity is brutal, yet necessary. It is the moment when the absurd is no longer a profound question to be solved, but a foundational fact to be inhabited. It is the conscious and deliberate decision to define your boundary, the absolute limit of your human experience, and recognize that everything within that limit is your unassailable, autonomous kingdom. It is the crucial psychological shift from merely acknowledging meaninglessness to actively, aggressively creating meaning despite meaninglessness. Imagine yourself on a sheer, smooth cliff face. Below you is the chasm of oblivion. Above you, the cold, indifferent stars. The initial instinctive reaction is panic, to scramble, to grasp at non-existent holds, to deny the danger by desperately searching for rescue. But then, noon arrives. You stop struggling against the inert, unresponsive rock. You breathe. You find the one tiny, perfect indentation for your foot, a secure, small anchor that offers no escape but plenty of rest. You realize that the vast, terrifying emptiness hasn't changed, but your relationship to the edge has fundamentally transformed. You are still suspended, still facing the void, but now you are resting perfectly within the suspension, stable in the unstable. This is the posture of the truly rebellious human being. This mechanism of acceptance is tricky because it involves surrender without resignation. Resignation means giving up the fight entirely, dropping your defenses, and letting the immense, indifferent wave take you under. Acceptance, in the Camusian sense, means feeling the full, undeniable force of the wave, knowing it cannot be stopped or reasoned with, yet choosing precisely where on the crest you will stand. It demands defiance built upon knowledge. The core paradox is this: the only way to genuinely rebel against the human condition is to fully, courageously embrace it. You look the lack of inherent purpose straight in the eye, and instead of weeping or denying the vision, you say, "Fine. If the universe offers no answers, I will paint the purpose myself, using the brief span of my life as the canvas." Tension mounts because this level of clarity feels unforgiving. Insight follows when you realize that unforgiving truth is the only material robust enough for genuine freedom. Where does this philosophy meet your life right now as you wait for sleep? It's in the relentless psychological scroll, the endless stream of comparison that defines modern striving. The limit today is often not a physical cliff, but the manufactured boundary between enough and more. When you consciously choose to stop fighting the immutable reality of your current situation, your job, your relationships, your own finite time, and anchor yourself deeply in the present reality of what is, the anxiety that drives the relentless search for more often collapses instantly. You stop trying to transcend the limit and begin to exploit the magnificent space contained within it. You find the strength to choose focused, deliberate action over draining, panicked anxiety. The profound psychological impact of this equilibrium is the complete redirection of hope. This acceptance is not the destruction of hope, but its mature, realistic regrounding. Instead of placing hope in a far-off celestial future or in some ultimate metaphysical answer, you ground it in the immediate human creation of value and aesthetic choice. You become your own source of affirmation, your own meaning maker. This profound, internal shift grants you a deep immunity to external validation. The weight of the world, which constantly demands that meaning be bestowed upon you from the outside, is replaced by the lightness of existence, where meaning is generated entirely by you. You are simultaneously infinitesimally small in the cosmic sense, and utterly monumental in the chosen rebellion of your life. This is equilibrium in extremis: to stand exposed under the harshest light, knowing you will eventually burn away and cease to be, but choosing, right now, in this absolute present, to feel the defiant warmth. Sleep not to escape the absurdity, but to gather the necessary energy to greet it, courageously, beautifully, again at dawn. Temporary sanctuary, beauty as the final refuge. The great pause, when beauty becomes a weapon against meaninglessness. Have you ever noticed how the sight of perfect light hitting a window pane or the flawless structure of a melody can momentarily silence the screaming calculations of your own mortality? It is a fleeting truce, an unsolicited armistice in the ceaseless conflict between your longing for meaning and the universe's resolute silence. This is the temporary sanctuary, the final refuge built not of faith or logic, but of pure, unqualified aesthetics. In the architecture of the absurd, we establish that the world offers no inherent meaning, and our deep human need for meaning is constantly frustrated. This tension, the confrontation, is the core. But Camus didn't preach suicide or nihilistic resignation. He proposed the revolt. And one of the most immediate, tangible forms of this revolt is the embrace of what he called the palpable joy of the present. It is the recognition of beauty, not as a signpost to heaven, but as a pure, self-contained moment of affirmation right here, right now. It is the ultimate refusal to despair. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a great chasm, knowing the landscape before you is vast, indifferent, and ultimately scheduled for erasure, that the geological timescale laughs at your lifespan. The vastness is terrifying. Yet, just as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the clouds in impossible shades of bruised violet and burning gold, you stop calculating the descent. For that minute, the universe is not a terrifying problem to be solved. It is simply a spectacle to be witnessed. The absurdity is still present, waiting, chilling your skin, but the undeniable, unearned beauty acts as a temporary, perfect shield, rendering the ultimate verdict irrelevant. This is where the exquisite paradox resides. The beauty we cherish most, the bloom of a flower, the perfect chord in a jazz progression, the fleeting warmth of connection, is fundamentally useless in solving the existential equation. It does not provide the why. It does not grant you immortality. If anything, its very fragility reinforces the final cold fact of impermanence. The rose fades precisely because it is finite, and its fading underscores the tragedy of all things. But this temporary uselessness becomes its ultimate defiant power. When you stop demanding purpose from the spectacular, when you relinquish the need for the sunrise to be an instruction manual, you are truly free to appreciate it as an event unto itself. You are no longer waiting for the world to reveal its secret. You are celebrating its magnificent silence. This is not escapism. It is perhaps the highest form of engagement, a declaration that even if the whole system is rigged, you will still admire the craftsmanship. We spend so much contemporary energy constructing digital fortresses of false meaning, checking feeds, accruing status, seeking perpetual validation, anything to avoid the silent expanse of genuine self-reflection. But those transactional sanctuaries crumble instantly under the weight of true existential inquiry. The refuge offered by aesthetic appreciation, a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, the silent rhythm of rain hitting the roof. The deliberate act of looking at the sky until your neck hurts requires no transaction, no contractual agreement, only presence. It forces you back into the immediate reality of your senses, grounding you forcefully in the only moment you genuinely possess. This one, untainted by the ghosts of the future or the obligations of the past. When you choose to halt the frantic search for transcendent meaning and instead immerse yourself in the immediate sensory texture of life, you are performing a radical act of psychological defiance. You are refusing to let the magnitude of the void negate the intensity of the moment. You are essentially saying, yes, it is meaningless, but look at how vividly, how beautifully this meaninglessness expresses itself right now. The suffocating weight lifts because you stop trying to carry the whole universe on your shoulders. You only chose to hold this single, shining shard of immediate experience. You stopped trying to justify your existence and simply started occupying it. This experience, this perfect, finite absorption in the beautiful, is the defiant spirit solidified. It is the recognition that while the vast cosmic indifference remains, your capacity for joy, for awe, and for intense momentary appreciation is your unique human signature. This is the temporary sanctuary that no decree of fate can take from you. So let the truth be this: beauty is not the answer, nor the map, nor the destination. It is the temporary, magnificent architecture of your final, perfect refusal. It is the one room where the absurd can knock, demanding entry, but you don't have to let it in. You can simply turn back to the window and admire the perfect light. The will to happiness, imagining Sisyphus content. The will to happiness, the final ascent. You have walked with Sisyphus to the summit, watching him heave the stone, feeling the burning effort in your own shoulders. You have seen the stone tumble, and you understand the punishment. But the crucial, revolutionary act of the absurd hero is not the straining upward push. It is the moment immediately following the descent of the stone, the walk back down. This is where Camus places the profound, quiet victory. This is the will to happiness consciously chosen against all cosmological evidence. Can you truly imagine Sisyphus content? Can you visualize him smiling, not in spite of his task, but because he has understood the intrinsic nature of the repetition? The moment the rock rests at the base, and Sisyphus begins his silent return to retrieve it, the cycle momentarily breaks. The great weight of the universe is lifted, replaced by the simple rhythmic weight of his own footsteps on the dry earth. This interval is his time. The gods sentenced him to toil, but they inadvertently gifted him a space for reflection, a moment of reprieve where he is utterly free of the burden, superior to his fate. This is not the happiness of reward, nor the fleeting joy of success. This is the internal happiness of ownership. He walks down knowing exactly what awaits him, yet choosing to meet it with clear eyes. We define freedom often by the ability to escape, to choose a different path. But Sisyphus teaches us freedom can be found in the affirmation of the path already given. The ultimate existential defiance is not to rail against the repetition, but to find dignity within it. The paradox is this: the moment he accepts the futility of reaching the summit permanently is the moment the summit loses its power over him. The punishment fails because his consciousness transforms labor into fate, and fate, when understood and embraced, becomes the individual's own domain. The crushing weight is external, the contemplation is internal, and that space remains inviolable. Consider the metaphor of the descent. It is heavy with memory. Sisyphus remembers the effort, the sweat, the momentary heartbreak of the fall. But as he walks, he is compiling inventory, not of misery, but of consciousness. He sees the sun slant differently across the crags. He feels the coolness of the air returning to his lungs. He hears the faint echo of the fallen stone. The path is his. Every pebble, every contour of the miserable mountain he knows intimately. He is a master of his landscape. The gods condemned him to endless labor, but Sisyphus, through awareness, has mastered the geology of his hell. The true mechanism of his contentment lies in recognizing that his awareness is the very thing the gods cannot touch. They can manipulate his environment, his task, and his physical being, but they cannot control his internal narrative. This is the crucial, chilling insight. Happiness, in the context of the absurd, is entirely divorced from outcome. You stop asking, "Why am I doing this?" and start asking, "How richly can I experience the doing?" This choice transforms the curse into a vocation, a deliberate act of being present. The weight is still there, yes, but the spirit, the inner self, has learned to move around it. This philosophy applies profoundly to your own repetitive, often mundane cycles. The daily grind, the unchanging routine, the emotional patterns you wish you could break. These are your personal mountains. You often measure happiness by the magnitude of your escapes or the successful completion of a goal. But what if freedom is found in the gaps? In the moment between the last frustrating email and the first sip of your evening tea? In the rhythmic certainty of running the same route year after year? When you stop fighting the absurdity of the repetition, you start to notice the sheer richness of the details embedded within the cycle. The psychological impact of this reversal is the liberation from hope. Hope, in the Camusian sense, is a trap. It ties your current state to a future outcome that is likely illusory. By abandoning the hope of permanent escape or ultimate reward, Sisyphus and you are forced into the immediate, absolute present. This is not hopelessness, but rather a robust, grounded confidence in your own ability to define worth independent of any external validation, judgment, or celestial promise. It means choosing to value the breath you take right now over the imagined paradise. And so, we leave him on the slope, descending, preparing to start again. He knows his fate, he knows the stone will fall, and yet he is smiling. He has realized that the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. He carries the weight of the world only when he is pushing the stone. But in the descent, he carries only the weight of his own magnificent, resilient consciousness. Look closer at his shadow as he walks down. The shadow proves the sunshine, even on the long, quiet walk back into the darkness. The sharpness of acceptance, lucidity, facing the end. We arrive now at the coldest, yet perhaps the most liberating realization offered by the philosophy of the absurd, the requirement of lucidity. It is not enough merely to observe the walls separating your longing for meaning from the world's silence. You must stare into its unyielding granite face until the contours become familiar. Lucidity in the Camusian framework is not mere intellectual assent. It is a raw, visceral acceptance of impermanence, a refusal to use the anesthetic of false hope or eternal promises. It is the recognition that the grandeur of your life must be built upon the foundations of certain decay. This clarity is the last barricade against the temptation of escape. Think for a moment, not about the general philosophical proposition of death, but about your death. How do you truly live when you know the final curtain is inevitable, not just abstractly, but feelingly? Can you accept that the beautiful complexity that is your consciousness, your memory, your love, your unique way of seeing the world will be extinguished? We often speak of facing the end, but usually we mean preparing for it, sorting finances, making amends. Lucidity demands a confrontation with the void itself, while you are still fully alive, awake, and capable of enjoyment. This is where acceptance sharpens into a potent tool, defining the limits of your freedom only to define your capacity for life. Camus insisted that once we have grasped the absurd, the fundamental divorce between our rational mind and the universe, the integrity of our philosophical stance depends entirely on our subsequent actions. We cannot simply retreat into a comforting metaphysical narrative, the leap of faith, nor can we destroy the mind that perceives the rift, suicide. Lucidity is the commitment to remain balanced on the knife edge, to maintain the absolute clarity of that initial realization. It means continuously rejecting the temptation to believe in a predefined script, recognizing that your existence is an improvised performance on a stage that cares nothing for the play. The ultimate act of rebellion is to hold that clear thought steady against the overwhelming pressure of desire for eternity. Imagine yourself as a tireless mountain climber. You have devoted years to scaling the highest peak, convinced that the summit holds the key to all knowledge, perhaps a thriving sanctuary. You finally reach the top, battered and exhausted, only to find the summit is utterly barren, just cold rock and thin air, no secret garden, no divine manuscript. What do? The temptation is to descend immediately, to seek the illusion of comfort back down in the foothills of hope. But the lucid choice is to stay for a moment, to look out over the vast, indifferent landscape you conquered, to breathe that cold, honest air, and to realize that the value was not in the destination's reward, but in the strenuous, conscious climb itself. The victory is the knowledge that you saw the truth and chose to inhabit it fully. This realization unlocks a profound paradox. You find freedom only by accepting the ultimate confinement, the certainty of your temporal boundary. The tension arises because the human spirit is programmed for expansion, for eternity, yet the physical reality is programmed for limits. We fight fiercely against the idea that our impact will fade, that our achievements will eventually be forgotten. This internal friction, this attempt to bargain with the laws of entropy, is exhausting. Lucidity cuts through that bargaining. It declares, yes, I am mortal. Yes, the universe is silent. Therefore, every moment I spend resisting this truth is a moment stolen from the quantity of defiant life I am afforded. The sharpness of acceptance is the realization that your mortality is your most effective editor. How does this sharpness apply to your current anxieties? The low hum of worry that precedes sleep. Perhaps you are agonizing over an incomplete legacy, or driven by the frantic need to perform meaningful work that society dictates. Lucidity forces the question, if the cosmic accounting ledger is empty, if the performance is solely for your own audience of one, Why are you prioritizing the arbitrary demands of a temporal world over your actual physical experience of existence right now? This clarity strips away the weight of mandated transcendence. The value of the moment is not defined by its consequence in the future, but by its intensity and presence in the now, unfettered by artificial necessity. The psychological impact of embracing this sharp acceptance is immense. When you stop asking why you are here, a question the universe will never answer, you can finally focus on how well you are here. The burden of achieving external, everlasting significance dissolves. You are no longer living under the tyranny of the should. Instead, you adopt the mindset of the condemned individual who, having accepted their sentence, sees the sunlight and the movement of the trees with an unprecedented, vibrant appreciation. Their focus shifts entirely to the quality of their remaining days, untainted by the illusion of a prolonged future. This is the victory of the absurd hero, to maintain absolute clarity until the very end, refusing to surrender to comforting fictions, and thus defining your freedom by the precise measure of your chains. You look at the finality and say, I see you, and I still choose to live fully in spite of you. The true sharpness of acceptance lies in this defiant lucidity. It is the final potent refusal to compromise the truth of your existence, making your brief, fiery journey the most authentic story ever told. The ultimate affirmation, the persistence of human love. The ultimate affirmation, love in the face of silence. You've stood on the edge of the precipice long enough to feel the gravity of the void. You've counted the cycles of Sisyphus and measured the silence of the heavens. If the universe refuses to offer you a reason to continue, if meaning is a mirage reflected in your own desperate consciousness, what then is left to affirm? What is the single defiant act that doesn't seek to escape the absurd, but embraces it completely, yet still finds a way to be warm? The quiet, trembling answer, the ultimate insurrection against indifference, is the persistence of human love. This is not a sentimental escape hatch. It is a profound choice of solidarity. For Camus, the revolt against the absurd could never be a solitary endeavor. While the initial discovery of meaninglessness is intensely personal, the response, the affirmation, must be communal. Love in this context is not a feeling, but a stance. The radical decision to bear witness to another consciousness struggling just as you are. It is the rejection of the cold mathematics of the cosmos in favor of the unpredictable, messy, irrational warmth generated between two temporary beings. It is the Camusian yes. Imagine this choice as two sailors in a tiny boat, adrift on an ocean that stretches infinitely in every direction, under a sky utterly devoid of stars. They know there is no port, no rescue, and their journey is ultimately futile, but they are bound together not by hope, but by the necessity of the moment. They choose to bail water for each other. They choose to share the last ration. Their hands, calloused and exhausted, meet over the tiller. That shared glance, that mutual recognition of the shared sentence, is the birth of meaning. It is meaning that exists only between them, a small, fiercely protected pocket of light within the overwhelming darkness. This love is defined by its tragic limitations. It is inherently paradoxical. To love another person deeply is to fully embrace their unique absurdity and their guaranteed eventual absence. You choose connection, knowing that the sharper the bond, the deeper the cut of loss will inevitably be. You accept the vulnerability that ensures future pain, because the alternative, the isolation of complete self-preservation, is a slow, existential death. We build elaborate, temporary structures of shared existence, memories, promises, traditions, on ground we know to be fundamentally unstable. This is the defiance, accepting the certainty of ruin while still devoting your whole heart to the building process. This mechanism reveals the deepest conflict, the human impulse toward permanence clashing with cosmic impermanence. We seek eternity in the eyes of the one we love, yet we hold them knowing they are merely dust in motion, fleeting and beautiful. The tension is excruciating, but it is precisely in this tension that the affirmation gains its power. The value of the kiss is not in its duration, but in the sheer bravery of its execution against the backdrop of infinity. You are essentially saying, though everything is meaningless, this right now matters profoundly because we choose it to matter. Look around your life right now. This is not about the grand, sweeping narrative of romantic fate. It is about the quiet, persistent acts of empathy. It is the deep focus you give when someone you care about is describing their confusion. It is the shared silence that requires no explanation. It is the persistent, daily effort required to maintain the fragile shelter of connection, even when exhaustion or indifference attempts to seep in. When you recognize the absurdity in someone else's struggle and choose to alleviate their burden, even momentarily, you are actively performing the ultimate affirmation. You are refusing to let the vast, silent universe dictate the value of a single human life. The psychological impact is revolutionary. It transforms the burden of the absurd from a private, suffocating realization into a communal, bearable task. You are no longer condemned alone. You are standing shoulder to shoulder with others who have also rejected the promise of false comfort. By choosing compassion, you shift your identity from a lone traveler seeking an unattainable meaning to a builder of immediate human value. You become the source of the warmth rather than a supplicant begging for it. You affirm the dignity of the human struggle itself, making solidarity the highest virtue. The universe remains silent. Sisyphus still rolls the rock. But for a brief, incandescent moment, holding the hand of another human being, you realize that the ultimate meaning is found not in solving the riddle of existence, but in making sure no one has to face the ultimate silence completely alone. Love is the ultimate act of lucid, magnificent disobedience. Those who arrive here understand more than words. Leave a word below that captures what you felt tonight and share it with someone who still searches for meaning.